Part 5. Teaching Stories. Teaching stories are told in public and form part of the outer activity of dervishes. They are intended to lay a basis of knowledge about Sufism and its characteristic methods of thought. They are seldom employed for didactic purposes. The inner dimensions of teaching stories, however, are held to make them capable of revealing, according to the stage of development of the student, more and more planes of significance. It is this theory that one may work on different layers of the same material, which is unfamiliar to many people, who tend to prefer being told that a story has one message, or one use only. The Generous Man. There was a rich and generous man of Bokhara. Because he had a high rank in the invisible hierarchy, he was known as the President of the world. He made one condition about his bounty. Every day he gave gold to one category of people, the sick, widows, and so on. But nothing was to be given to anyone who opened his mouth. Not all could keep silent. One day it was the turn of lawyers to receive their share of the bounty. One of them could not restrain himself and made the most complete appeal possible. Nothing was given to him. This was not the end, however, of his efforts. The following day, invalids were being helped, so he pretended that his limbs had been broken. But the president knew him, and he obtained nothing. The very next day he posed in another guise, covering his face, with the people of another category. He was again recognized and sent away. Again and again he tried, even disguising himself as a woman, again without result. Finally this lawyer found an undertaker and told him to wrap him in a shroud. When the president passes by, he will perhaps assume that this is a corpse. He may throw down some money towards my burial, and I will give you a share of it. This was done. A gold piece from the hand of the president fell upon the shroud. The lawyer seized it out of fear that the undertaker would get it first. Then he spoke to the benefactor. "You denied me your bounty. Note how I have gained it." "Nothing can you have from me," replied the generous man, "until you die." This is the meaning of the cryptic phrase, "Man must die before he dies." The gift comes after death and not before. And this death, even, is not possible without help. Destruction of a town. A Sufi once exclaimed in an unguarded moment, "I shall be the cause of the destruction of this town." Fortunately, people thought he was mad or just trying to frighten people. They did not harm him, but on the other hand, they did not take any interest in what he was saying. He was, after all, frail and a man of no outward consequence. One day the Sufi had climbed a tree when he fell. His body broke the wall of a reservoir below. The flood which resulted destroyed the town. Only after the accident, when his body was found, were his words remembered. The Magic Horse. A king had 2 sons. The first helped the people by working for them in a manner they understood. The second was called lazy because he was a dreamer as far as anyone could see. The first son gained great honours in his land. The second obtained from a humble carpenter a wooden horse and sat astride it. But the horse was a magical one. It carried the rider, if he was sincere, to his heart's desire. Seeking his heart's desire, the young prince disappeared one day on the horse. He was absent a long time. After many adventures, he returned with a beautiful princess from the country of light, and his father was overjoyed at his safe return and listened to the story of the magic horse. The horse was made available to anyone who wanted it in that country. But many people preferred the obvious benefits which the actions of the first prince provided for them, because to them, the horse always looked like a plaything. They did not get beyond the outer appearance of the horse, which was not impressive, just like a plaything. When the old king died, the prince who liked to play with toys became, by his wish, the king. But people in general despised him. They much preferred the excitement and interest of the discoveries and activities of the practical prince. Unless we listen to the lazy prince, whether he has a princess from the country of light with him or not, we shall not get beyond the outer appearance of the horse. Even if we like the horse, it is not its outward shape which can help us travel to our destination. The Cradle. A child was born, and the father went to a carpenter and asked him to make a cradle for it. The carpenter told him to come back in a week to collect it. When he returned, it was not finished. The man went back week after week, and still the cradle was not to be seen. Eventually the child grew into a man. In his turn he married, and his wife bore him a child. His own father said to him, "Go to see the carpenter and ask him whether your cradle is ready yet." So the young man went to the carpenter's shop and reminded him about the cradle. "Here is an opportunity," he said, "for you to finish the job. I now have a small son, and the cradle will be ideal for him." "Be off with you," said the carpenter. "I refuse to be stampeded in my work just because you and your family are obsessed by what they want." The Three Deaf Men and the Dumb Dervish. Once upon a time there lived a poor goatherd. Every day he took some goats to a hill overlooking the village where he lived with his family to seek fresh grazing. He was deaf, but this did not matter to him at all. One day he found that his wife had forgotten to give him the bundle containing his midday meal, nor did she send their child with it, as in the past when it had been forgotten, even when the sun was high overhead. "I will go home and get it," thought the goatherd. "I cannot stay out here all this time until sundown without a bite to eat." Suddenly he noticed a man cutting shrubs on the hillside. He went up to him and said, "Brother, please keep an eye on the goats and see that they do not stray, for my wife has stupidly forgotten my midday meal, and I must go back to the village for it." Now the shrub cutter was also deaf, and he heard not one word of what had been said, and completely misunderstood the goatherd. He answered, "Why should I give you any of the shrubs which I am cutting for my own animals? I have a cow and 2 sheep at home, and I have to go far and wide for food for them. No, leave me. I want nothing to do with the likes of you, seeking to take what little belongs to me." And he waved his hand in derision, laughing harshly. The goatherd did not hear what was said, and replied, "Oh, thank you, kind friend, for agreeing. I shall be as quick as I can. Blessings be upon you, you have set my mind at ease." He ran off to the village, and went to his own humble hut. There he found his wife sick with a fever, with the neighbour's wife in attendance. He took his food bundle and ran back to the hill. He counted the goats carefully, and they were all there. The shrub cutter was still busy at his task, and the goatherd said to himself, "Why, what an excellent person this most trustworthy shrub cutter is. He has seen that my animals have not strayed, and seeks no thanks for this service. I will give him this lame goat which I meant to kill anyway. It will make a fine meal for him and his family tonight." So, putting the undersized lame goat upon his shoulders, he bounded down the hill, calling as he ran, "Ho, brother, here is a present for looking after my goats while I was away. My unfortunate wife has a fever, and that explains everything. Roast this goat for your evening meal tonight. See, it has a lame leg, and I meant to kill it anyway." But the other did not hear his words, and shouted in a rage, "Vile goatherd! I never saw what happened while you were gone. How can I be responsible for the leg of your infernal animal? I was busy cutting these shrubs and have no idea how it happened. Be off with you or I shall strike you." The goatherd was amazed at the man's enraged gestures, but he could not hear what he was saying, so he called to a passer-by who was riding a fine horse. "Noble sir, please, I beg you, tell me what this shrub cutter is talking about. I happen to be deaf, and do not know why he has refused my gift of a goat with such annoyance." Both the goatherd and the shrub cutter began to shout at the traveller, and he got off his horse and came towards them. Now he was a horse thief, and as deaf as a post, and he could not hear what they were saying. He was lost, and had meant to ask them where he was. But when he saw the threatening gestures of the two other men, he said, "Yes, brothers, I stole the horse, I confess, but I did not know that it belonged to you. Forgive me, I pray, for I had a fleeting moment of temptation and acted without thinking." "I had nothing to do with the laming of the goat," shouted the shrub cutter. "Get him to tell me why he will not accept my present," urged the goatherd. "I merely wanted to give it as a gesture of appreciation." "I certainly admit to taking the horse," said the thief, "but I am deaf, and I cannot hear which of you owns it." At that moment, an aged dervish came into view, walking along the dusty road towards the village. The shrub cutter ran to him and, pulling at his robe, said, "Venerable dervish, I am a deaf man who cannot make head or tail of what these other two are saying. Will you please, in your wisdom, judge and explain what each of them is shouting about?" The dervish, however, was dumb, and could not answer, but he came to them and looked searchingly into the faces of the three deaf ones, who had now stopped talking. He looked so long and penetratingly, first at one, then at the other, that they began to feel uncomfortable. His glittering black eyes bored into theirs, seeking the truth of the matter, trying to get a clue to the situation. But each of the others began to fear that he was going to bewitch them or gain control over their wills in some way. And suddenly the thief sprang upon the horse and rode it furiously away. Immediately the goatherd began to round up his animals, driving them farther up the hill. The shrub cutter, lowering his eyes from those of the dervish, packed his shrubs into a net and hoisted it onto his shoulders, bounding down the hill towards his home. The dervish continued his journey, thinking to himself that speech can be such a useless form of communication, that man might just as well have never been given it. My Lady Fatima and the Animals. There was once a small girl who grew up with her parents, all alone in a forest. One day she found that her father and mother were dead, and she would have to fend for herself. Her parents had left behind a mihrab, a strange curved ornament like a window frame, which they kept hung on a wall of their hut. "Since I am now alone," said Fatima, "and shall have to survive in this forest where the living things are only animals, it would be best if I could talk to them and understand their speech." So she spent a good part of her day addressing this aspiration to the frame on the wall. "Mihrab, give me the power to understand animals and to speak with them." After a long while, she suddenly had the impression that she would be able to communicate with birds, animals, even fish. So she went into the woods to try. Soon she came to a pool. On the top of the pool was a pond fly, which skipped about on the surface and never entered the water. Swimming in the water were several fish, and stuck to the bottom of the pond were some snails. Fatima said, in order to start a conversation, "Fly, why do you not enter the water?" "Why should I, supposing that that were possible, which it is not?" asked the fly. "Because you would be safe from the birds, which swoop down and eat you." "I haven't been eaten yet, have I?" said the fly. And that was the end of the conversation. Then Fatima spoke to the fish. "Fish," she said to it through the water, "why do you not find out how to get out of the water little by little? I have heard that some fish can do this." "Oh, absolutely impossible," said the fish. "Nobody has done that and survived. We are brought up to believe that it is both a sin and a mortal danger." And he turned his back and dived into the shadows, unwilling to hear such nonsense. So she called down to the snail, "Snail, you could crawl out of the water and find nice herbs to eat. I have heard that snails can really do that." "A question is best answered by a question when a wise snail hears it," said the snail. "Perhaps you would be kind enough to tell me exactly why you have so much interest in my welfare. People should look after themselves." "Well," said Fatima, "I suppose it is because when a person can see more about another person, he wants to help him attain greater heights." "That seems a strange idea to me," said the snail, and crawled out of earshot under a rock. Fatima gave up the fly, the fish, and the snail, and wandered on into the forest, looking for something else to talk to. She felt that she must be able to be of use to someone. After all, she had much more knowledge than these forest folk. A bird, she thought, for example, could be warned to store food for the winter, or to nest near the warmth of a hut, so that it would not die unnecessarily. But she did not see a bird. Instead, she came across the hut of a charcoal burner. He was an old man, and he sat in front of his door burning charcoal to take to the market. Fatima, delighted at seeing another human being, the only one other than her parents whom she had met, ran up to him. She told him her experiences of that day. "Do not worry about that, child," said the kindly old man. "There are things which a human being has to learn, and those things are of vital importance to his future." "Things to learn?" said Fatima. "And what should I want with things to learn, pray? They would only most probably change my way of life and thinking." And like the fly, the fish, and the snail, she moved away out of contact with the charcoal burner. Fatima, daughter of Walia, spent another 30 years like the fly, the fish, and the snail, before she learned anything at all. Moses and the Shepherd. This explanation of a notable passage in Rumi's Mathnavi was given by Khwaja Fidai of Kars in his Meditations on the Couplets of our master Jalaluddin Rumi. It draws attention to the different levels of human understanding, emphasizing that a man can be reached only through the ranges of association which he can conceive. A part of the duty of every Sufi teacher, however, is to prepare his students for perception of the higher parallelism. It is therefore considered to be most incorrect to emphasize the material advantages of Sufism alone in entirely conventional terms. Sufism, therefore, is not presented by teachers as a therapy or a cure for the worldly ills of man. No man can understand more than his whole mind is capable of understanding, and for this reason it has been truly said, "Speak to every man according to his understanding," by tradition ascribed to Muhammad. As each man can perceive, so will he benefit. If a man or woman is capable only of low perceptions, he or she will seek and gain satisfaction through them. It is related that Moses called a humble shepherd a blasphemer, because he heard the poor man offering to comb God's hair, wash his robe and kiss his hand. God admonished Moses, indirectly teaching him, from this experience on this occasion, that the shepherd had not the intelligence or the experience to realize that Moses was talking about an incorporeal deity. "Thus hast thou driven away a worshipper from the nearest to me that he could approach. There is a gradation in all men. Each will perceive what he can perceive, and at the stage at which he can perceive it." The Cap of Invisibility. In the land which is unseen to us, but in reality more real than the real, there lived a boy, and his name was Kazjan. His elder brother, Jankus, was hard-working and intelligent, but he, Kazjan, was neither hard-working nor idle. He was neither intelligent nor stupid, but he used to apply himself to any problem he could, as well as he could. The two brothers, neither of whom seemed to be making great progress in the unseen land, decided to seek their fortunes together. They walked away from their home one afternoon, and it was not long before darkness separated them, and, as for Jankus, we shall hear presently. Kazjan came suddenly upon a quarrel. 3 men were arguing, it seemed, about 3 items lying on the ground. They explained to him the trouble. Their father had died and left them a conical hat, the couloir of invisibility, a flying carpet, and a staff which made the carpet fly when it was beaten with it. Each one wanted all the items, or at least first choice of them. Their reasons were that they were the eldest, the middle, and the youngest sons, and each on this account claimed priority. They are all unworthy, thought Kazjan, but he offered to adjudicate between them. He told them all to withdraw 40 paces and then turn around. Before they could finish his instructions, he had placed the couloir on his head, got onto the carpet, and struck it with the stick. "Carpet," he commanded, "take me to wherever my brother Jankus may be." Now not long before, his brother Jankus had been snatched up by a mighty anka bird, which had deposited him on the minaret of a mosque in Khorasan. Because Kazjan was thinking at the time, however, that Jankus must have been made a prince at least, the carpet heard this thought, and, flying with immense speed, came lightly to rest on the battlements of the king's palace of the city in Balkh in Khorasan. The king, who had seen him alight, came out at once, saying, "Perhaps this is the youth who it is foretold will help my daughter and yet not desire her." Kazjan saluted the king, and told him that he was seeking his brother Jankus. "Before you do that," said the king, "I want you to help me with your special equipment and keen mind." The princess, it transpired, used to disappear every night and return in the morning. Nobody knew how. This had been foretold and had come to pass. Kazjan agreed to help and suggested that he should watch by her bedside. That night, through half-closed eyes, he saw the princess look to see whether he was asleep. Then she took up a needle and stuck it in his foot, but he did not move, because he was expecting some such thing. "I am ready," said the princess. And all at once a terrible spirit appeared and took her on his shoulders, and they soared together through the ceiling without making any impression on it. Rubbing his eyes, Kazjan immediately placed the couloir of invisibility on his head, sat on the magic carpet, and, beating it with the stick, cried, "Take me where the princess has gone." There was a rushing and a roaring, and Kazjan found himself in the unseen land beyond the unseen land. There was the princess accompanied by the spirit. They walked through forests of trees of precious stones. Kazjan broke off a piece of jade tree with diamond fruits. Then they walked through a garden of unknown plants of unexcelled beauty. Kazjan put a few of the seeds in his pocket. Finally they stood by a lake whose reeds were shimmering swords. "These are the swords which can kill spirits such as me," said the spirit to the princess. "But only a man called Kazjan can do it, so it has been foretold." As soon as he heard these words, Kazjan stepped forward, seized one of the swords from the reed bed, and cut off the awful head of the spirit. He seized the princess and dragged her onto the carpet. Soon they were speeding back to the palace of the king of Balkh in Khorasan. Kazjan took the princess at once before the king, waking him unceremoniously from his slumber. "Your Majesty," he said, "here is your daughter, and I have released her from the grasp of a demon in such and such a manner." And he related all that had befallen them, producing the pieces of jewel and seeds as proof. Released at last, the princess offered to marry Kazjan, but Kazjan, asking for a few moments' leave, flew on his magic carpet to find his brother Jankus. Jankus was sleeping in a caravanserai because he had only been able to obtain employment as a teacher in a seminary, and the pay was very low. When they returned to the court, the princess was immediately smitten by the manly features of Jankus, and she decided that she wanted to marry him instead of Kazjan. "This is exactly what I was about to suggest," said Kazjan and the king together. They lived happily ever after, for the kingdom was handed over to Jankus and his bride, while the king of Balkh and Kazjan together transferred themselves onto the magic carpet, to the unseen land beyond the unseen land, which now became their joint kingdom. The King and the Wolf. A certain king decided to tame a wolf and make it a pet. This desire of his was based on ignorance and the need to be approved or admired by others, a common cause of much trouble in the world. He caused a cub to be taken from its mother as soon as it was born and to be brought up among tame dogs. When the wolf was fully grown, it was brought to the king, and for many days it behaved exactly like a dog. People who saw this astonishing sight marvelled and thought the king to be a wonder. They acted in accordance with this belief, making the king their adviser in all things and attributing great powers to him. The king himself believed that a near miracle had occurred. One day, when he was out hunting, the king heard a wolf pack coming near. As they approached, the tame wolf jumped up, bared his fangs, and ran to welcome them. Within a minute he was away, restored to his natural companions. This is the origin of the proverb, "A wolf cub will always become a wolf, even if it is reared among the sons of man." The Watermelon Hunter. Once upon a time there was a man who strayed from his own country into the world known as the Land of Fools. He soon saw a number of people flying in terror from a field where they had been trying to reap wheat. "There is a monster in that field," they told him. He looked and saw that it was a watermelon. He offered to kill the monster for them. When he had cut the melon from its stalk, he took a slice and began to eat it. The people became even more terrified of him than they had been of the melon. They drove him away with pitchforks, crying, "He will kill us next, unless we get rid of him." It so happened that at another time another man also strayed into the Land of Fools, and the same thing started to happen to him. But instead of offering to help them with the monster, he agreed with them that it must be dangerous, and by tiptoeing away from it with them, he gained their confidence. He spent a long time with them in their houses until he could teach them, little by little, the basic facts which would enable them not only to lose their fear of melons, but even to cultivate them themselves. His Excellency. By a series of misunderstandings and coincidences, Mullah Nasruddin found himself one day in the audience hall of the Emperor of Persia. The Shah was surrounded by self-seeking nobles, governors of provinces, courtiers and sycophants of all kinds. Each was pressing his own claim to be appointed head of the embassy, which was soon to set out for India. The Emperor's patience was at an end, and he raised his head from the importunate mass, mentally invoking the aid of heaven in his problem as to who to choose. His eyes lighted upon Mullah Nasruddin. "This man is to be the ambassador," he announced. "So now leave me in peace." Nasruddin was given rich clothes, and an enormous chest of rubies, diamonds, emeralds, and priceless works of art was entrusted to him, the gift of the Shah to the Great Mogul. The courtiers, however, were not finished. United for once by this affront to their claims, they decided to encompass the downfall of the mullah. First they broke into his quarters and stole the jewels, which they divided among themselves, replacing them with earth to make up the weight. Then they called upon Nasruddin, determined to ruin his embassy, to get him into trouble, and in the process to discredit their master as well. "Congratulations, great Nasruddin," they said. "What the fountain of wisdom, peacock of the world, has ordered must be the essence of all wisdom. We therefore hail you. But there are just a couple of points upon which we may be able to advise you, accustomed as we are to the behaviour of diplomatic emissaries." "I should be obliged if you would tell me," said Nasruddin. "Very well," said the chief of the intriguers. "The first thing is that you must be humble. In order to prove how modest you are, therefore, you should not show any sign of self-importance. When you reach India, you must enter as many mosques as you can and make collections for yourself. The second thing is that you must observe court etiquette in the country to which you are accredited. This will mean that you will refer to the Great Mogul as the Full Moon." "But is that not a title of the Persian emperor?" "Not in India." So Nasruddin set out. The Persian emperor told him as they took leave, "Be careful, Nasruddin. Adhere to etiquette, for the Mogul is a mighty emperor and we must impress him while not affronting him in any way." "I am well prepared, Majesty," said Nasruddin. As soon as he entered the territory of India, Nasruddin went into a mosque and mounted the pulpit. "O people," he cried, "see in me the representative of the shadow of Allah upon earth, the axis of the globe. Bring out your money, for I am making a collection." This he repeated in every mosque he could find, all the way from Baluchistan to Imperial Delhi. He collected a great deal of money. "Do with it," the councillors had said, "what you will, for it is the product of intuitive growth and bestowal, and as such its use will create its own demand." All that they wanted to happen was for the mullah to be exposed to ridicule for collecting in this shameless manner. "The holy must live from their holiness," roared Nasruddin at mosque after mosque. "I give no account, nor do I expect any. To you, money is something to be hoarded after being sought. You can exchange it for material things. To me, it is part of a mechanism. I am the representative of a natural force of intuitive growth, bestowal and disbursement." Now, as we all know, good often proceeds from apparent evil, and the reverse. Those who thought that Nasruddin was lining his own pockets did not contribute. For some reason, their affairs did not prosper. Those who were considered credulous and gave their money became, in a mysterious way, enriched. But to return to our story. Sitting on the peacock throne, the emperor at Delhi studied the reports which couriers were daily bringing him, describing the progress of the Persian ambassador. At first he could make no sense out of them. Then he called his council together. "Gentlemen," he said, "this Nasruddin must indeed be a saint or a divinely guided one. Who ever heard of anyone else violating the principle that one does not seek money without a plausible reason, lest a wrong interpretation be placed upon one's motives?" "May your shadow never grow less," they replied. "O infinite extension of all wisdom, we agree. If there are men like this in Persia, we must beware, for their moral ascendancy over our materialistic outlook is plain." Then a runner arrived from Persia, with a secret letter in which the Mogul spies at the imperial court reported, "Mullah Nasruddin is a man of no consequence in Persia. He was chosen absolutely at random to be ambassador. We cannot fathom the reason for the Shah's not being more selective." The Mogul called his council together. "Incomparable birds of paradise," he told them, "a thought has manifested itself in me. The Persian emperor has chosen a man at random to represent his whole nation. This may mean that he is so confident of the consistent quality of his people that for him, anyone at all is qualified to undertake the delicate task of ambassador to the sublime court of Delhi. This indicates the degree of perfection attained, the amazingly infallible intuitive powers cultivated among them. We must reconsider our desire to invade Persia, for such a people could easily engulf our arms. Their society is organized on a different basis from our own. "You are right, superlative warrior on the frontiers," cried the Indian nobles. At length, Nasruddin arrived in Delhi. He was riding his old donkey and was followed by his escort, weighed down by the sacks of money which he had collected in the mosques. The treasure chest was mounted on an elephant, such was its size and weight. Nasruddin was met by the master of ceremonies at the gate of Delhi. The emperor was seated with his nobles in an immense courtyard, the reception hall of the ambassadors. This had been so arranged that the entrance was low. As a consequence, ambassadors were always obliged to dismount from their horses and enter the supreme presence on foot, giving the impression of supplicants. Only an equal could ride into the presence of an emperor. No ambassador had ever arrived astride a donkey, however, and thus there was nothing to stop Nasruddin trotting straight through the door and up to the imperial dais. The Indian king and his courtiers exchanged meaningful glances at this act. Nasruddin lithely dismounted, addressed the king as the full moon, and called for his treasure chest to be brought. When it was opened and the earth revealed, there was a moment of consternation. "I had better say nothing," thought Nasruddin, "for there is nothing to say which could mitigate this." So he remained silent. The Mogul whispered to his vizier, "What does this mean? Is this an insult to the highest eminence?" Incapable of believing this, the vizier thought furiously. Then he provided the interpretation. "It is a symbolic act, presence," he murmured. "The ambassador means that he acknowledges you as the master of the earth. Did he not call you the full moon?" The Mogul relaxed. "We are content with the offering of the Persian Shah, for we have no need of wealth, and we appreciate the metaphysical subtlety of the message." "I have been told to say," said Nasruddin, remembering the essential gift-offering phrase given to him by the intriguers in Persia, "that this is all we have for your majesty." "That means that Persia will not yield one further ounce of her soil to us," whispered the interpreter of omens to the king. "Tell your master that we understand," smiled the Mogul. "But there is one other point. If I am the full moon, what is the Persian emperor?" "He is the new moon," said Nasruddin automatically. "The full moon is more mature and gives more light than the new moon, which is its junior," whispered the court astrologer to the Mogul. "We are content," said the delighted Indian. "You may return to Persia and tell the new moon that the full moon salutes him." The Persian spies at the court of Delhi immediately sent a complete account of this interchange to the Shah. They added that it was known that the Mughal emperor had been impressed and feared to plan war against the Persians because of the activities of Nasruddin. When he returned home, the Shah received the mullah in full audience. "I am more than pleased, friend Nasruddin," he said, "at the results of your unorthodox methods. Our country is saved, and this means that there will be no attempt at accounting for the jewels or the collecting in mosques. You are henceforth to be known by the special title of Safir, emissary."
"But your majesty," hissed his vizier, "this man is guilty of high treason, if not more. We have perfect evidence that he applied one of your titles to the Emperor of India, thus changing his allegiance and bringing one of your magnificent attributes into disrepute."
"Yes," thundered the Shah, "the sages have said wisely that To every perfection there is an imperfection. Nasruddin, why did you call me the new moon?"
"I don't know about protocol," said Nasruddin, "but I do know that the full moon is about to wane, and the new moon is still growing, with its glories ahead of it."
The emperor's mood changed. "Seize Anwar, the Grand Vizier," he roared. "Mullah, I offer you the position of Grand Vizier."
"What?" said Nasruddin. "Could I accept after seeing with my own eyes what happened to my predecessor?"
And what happened to the jewels and treasures which the evil courtiers had usurped from the treasure chest? That is another story. As the incomparable Nasruddin said, only children and the stupid seek cause and effect in the same story. Do more than laugh at fools. Once upon a time, there was a fool who was sent to buy flour and salt. He took a dish to carry his purchases. "Make sure," said the man who sent him, "not to mix the two things. I want them separate." When the shopkeeper had filled the dish with flour and was measuring out the salt, the fool said, "Do not mix it with the flour. Here, I will show you where to put it." And he inverted the dish to provide, from its upturned bottom, a surface upon which the salt could be laid. The flour, of course, fell onto the floor, but the salt was safe. When the fool got back to the man who had sent him, he said, "Here is the salt." "Very well," said the other man, "but where is the flour?" "It should be here," said the fool, turning the dish over. As soon as he did that, the salt fell to the ground, and the flour, of course, was seen to be gone. So it is with human beings. Doing one thing which they think to be right, they may undo another which is equally right. When this happens with thoughts instead of actions, man himself is lost, no matter how, upon reflection, he regards his thinking to have been logical. You have laughed at the joke of the fool. Now, will you do more, and think about your own thoughts as if they were the salt and the flour? The happiest man in the world. A man who was living in comfortable enough circumstances went one day to see a certain sage, reputed to have all knowledge. He said to him, "A great sage, I have no material problems, and yet I am always unsettled. For years I have tried to be happy, to find an answer to my inner thoughts, to come to terms with the world. Please advise me as to how I can be cured of this malaise." The sage answered, "My friend, what is hidden to some is apparent to others. Again, what is apparent to some is hidden to others. I have the answer to your ailment, though it is no ordinary medication. You must set out on your travels, seeking the happiest man in the world. As soon as you find him, you must ask him for his shirt and put it on." The seeker thereupon restlessly started looking for happy men. One after another he found them and questioned them. Again and again they said, "Yes, I am happy, but there is one happier than me." After travelling through one country after another for many, many days, he found the wood in which everyone said lived the happiest man in the world. He heard the sound of laughter coming from among the trees, and quickened his step until he came upon a man sitting in a glade. "Are you the happiest man in the world, as people say?" he asked. "Certainly I am," said the other man. "My name is so-and-so, my condition is such and such, and my remedy, ordered by the greatest sage, is to wear your shirt. Please give it to me. I will give you anything I have in exchange." The happiest man looked at him closely, and he laughed. He laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed. When he had quietened down a little, the restless man, rather annoyed at this reaction, said, "Are you unhinged, that you laugh at such a serious request?" "Perhaps," said the happiest man, "but if you had only taken the trouble to look, you would have seen that I do not possess a shirt." What then am I to do now? You will now be cured. Striving for something unattainable provides the exercise to achieve that which is needed, as when a man gathers all his strength to jump across a stream as if it were far wider than it is. He gets across the stream. The happiest man in the world then took off the turban whose end had concealed his face. The restless man saw that he was none other than the great sage who had originally advised him. "But why did you not tell me all this years ago when I came to see you?" the restless man asked in puzzlement. "Because you were not ready then to understand. You needed certain experiences, and they had to be given to you in a manner which would ensure that you went through them." The Sheep and the Purse. A man was walking along a road one day, followed by his sheep. A thief went after him, cut the rope of the sheep, and took it away. When he realized what had happened, the man ran all over the place looking for his animal. Presently he came to a well, where he saw a man apparently in despair. Although the man did not know it, he was the very same thief. He asked him what he was doing. The thief said, "I have dropped a purse into this well. It contains 500 silver coins. If you will jump in and get it back for me, I will give you 100 silver pieces." The man thought, "When one door shuts, 100 may open. This chance is worth 10 times the sheep which I have lost." He stripped himself and plunged into the well. And the thief carried off his clothes. Rumi. The Indian Bird. A merchant had a bird in a cage. He was going to India, the land from which the bird came, and asked him whether he could bring anything back for him. The bird asked for his freedom, but was refused. So he asked the merchant to visit a jungle in India and announce his captivity to the free birds who were there. The merchant did so, and no sooner had he spoken than a wild bird, just like his own, fell senseless out of a tree onto the ground. The merchant thought that this must be a relative of his own bird, and felt sad that he should have caused this death. When he got home, the bird asked him whether he had brought good news from India. "No," said the merchant. "I fear that my news is bad. One of your relations collapsed and fell at my feet as soon as I mentioned your captivity." As soon as these words were spoken, the merchant's bird collapsed and fell to the bottom of the cage. "The news of his kinsman's death has killed him too," thought the merchant. Sorrowfully he picked up the bird and put it on the windowsill. At once the bird revived and flew to a nearby tree. "Now you know," he said, "that what you thought was disaster was in fact good news for me, and how the message, the suggestion how to behave in order to free myself, was transmitted to me through you, my captor." And he flew away, free at last. Rumi.